So today we're going to discuss some contemporary literary theories in understanding myth, folk narratives, and literary texts. So when we pertain to literary texts, these are all types of literary traditions or texts, written of course, poems, short stories, essays, and even like creative nonfiction text. So basically we will have to discuss or put into terms that literary text means all writings regardless of their genre and conventions. Okay, so I know that you have knowledge of contemporary literary theories. So what are these anyway? So in the succeeding slides, we will refer to this as CLTs. CLTs, contemporary literary theories. We are going to use the acronym CLT for the succeeding slides. All right, so welcome, and I hope you will enjoy this slide. So if I get too fast, probably you just have to, of course, get into like a slower pace of this video or something if you have those capabilities. All right, so the objective of this lecture is to introduce contemporary literary theories, and I know that you have familiarities or sort of, familiar to these theories. And number two, to demonstrate the relevance of CLT interpreting myth, narratives, poems, or any literary text. And of course, the third dimension is to use CLT as a framework in consuming or interpreting a myth narrative or any other literary text in the language classroom and in setting language classroom setting and in teaching literature in general. So basically, these are two conventions in using literature to teach language. The first thing is about focus on grammar. That's what language classroom setting is. Focus on grammar, and that is the acquisition of proficiency or mastery in speaking the target language, and in our case, that's English. And in teaching literature, well, in teaching literature, our primary aim is to teach reading. Primary aim is to, the moralistic approach, find necessary moralistic elements from text to discuss a few, humanistic approach in developing the human psyche or developing values of our students. But regardless of these purposes, it's important that we have to know the conventions, teaching strategies, and methods on teaching or in using literature to teach language, to teach English, or to just consume literature for fun or for any other classroom engagement. Okay, next. So just a quick review what contemporary literary theories are. So basically, these are my words. I say that contemporary literary theories are the backbone of understanding and interpreting any literary text. So imagine your body. Of course, we can't stand without our spine. Our spine helps us to have the framework to be able to stand. So that's like our bone. These are of course the structures that help us to stand or to do all other physical activities. And imagine the building. Of course, before a building will get erected, we need a foundation, a strong foundation. This of course pertains to the use of steel, of course, mixed with concrete and any other materials to sustain its strength to build these structures. So same as contemporary literary theories, we cannot just simply say something about a literary text after reading them without even using a particular theory to define or interpret this literary text. Also, CLT may refer to the frameworks in interpreting the structure, form, and content of any literary text. So, what do we need to know and learn about the CLT or contemporary literary theories? It's important because we as readers need to know the message of the writers, the intentions of the writers in producing and or writing this literary text. Why meaning is important? Well, we are intelligent beings, so definitely we can use our mental faculties to discuss a lot of things and to reflect onto this text and to find meanings or produce meanings out of this text. So let me start with, of course, the first one. I know that this might sound kind of boring, but I hope that you have to pay attention onto this because we had been interpreting poems, and I've asked you to interpret poems during your exam, and of course during your task, like the one that I've given you recently. So what is Russian formalism? You can simply read it here. It's actually a literary school, um, a group of Russian formalist literary critic who have devised this particular framework to define or interpret the text. So it is said here that Russian formalism focuses on what is being said in the text. I repeat, focuses on what is being said in the text. So the text speaks for itself. The reader must look into the forms, structure, and language used in the text alone. By then, the text is defined as an entirely single identity or single entity, like our outside forces of it, like the context, are not brought up. The biographical sketch of the writer, who the writer is, his backgrounds are not brought up to interpret or define the meaning of the text or to identify the meaning of the text. But we just have to treat text itself, to treat the text as a single entity. So we don't look for cues outside of the text, such as details about the author, cultural implications, and even sociological influences. So Russian formalism does not consider the author's personal history, like what I said a while back, cultural influences, and the actual content of the work itself. It focuses on the genre of the writing. For example, formalism is connected with the use of grammar and syntax, meter in poetry, and even stylistics. So when we teach Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, and we just have to read a lot of stuffs like this, well, a lot of sociographical sketch, cultural sketch, and parallelisms are put into the text. And recently, GMA7 have produced this Maria Clara and Ibarra thing, with the use of magical realism, elements of magic or elements of something unreal that are fused with reality. So we call this literary device as magical realism. But in reality, a lot of parallelism are drawn during the narrative. For example, with women, treatment of women, how the priests or the priests have mistreated or used violence to punish women who have had conducted into, immoral conducts. For example, prostitution. How this lady was whipped violently by a certain praile, Padre Damaso, and then Barbie Portesa, acting as Clay, was like trying to protect the girl, but she was like abrupt or like discouraged by his professor. So those acts were actually parallel to what is happening in the modern world, but it's also an element of magical realism and the sociological context of what happened in the past in Rizal's time, and to us, what's happening to the abuses of women nowadays is a part of that. So in Russian formalism, we don't do such thing. We just have to let the text speak for itself. Okay, so Russian formalism emphasizes on unity or coherence in a literary text. Everything necessary to understand a text is found within the text itself. Do not bring in outside contexts or structures. So how are we able to interpret the text using the text itself? So we just have to look into these things: structure, imagery, unity, figurative language. Of course, these are the literary device: rhythms, rhymes, ambiguity, tension, argument, contradictions, tone, content, quality of writing. These may not pertain to all of the text. For example, in poem or for poetry, we can just use structure. This is how the texts are written. Imagery or mental pictures being said in poems. Unity, if there is unity. Figurative language are, of course, the metaphors used there, the simile or any other literary devices used in writing the poem, rhymes, and rhythms. While in essay, we can look into the theme, we can look into the tension, argument, conflict, or other things. For novel, we can look into the content, quality of writing. This pertains to how the author have used a particular feature of his language or of his skill in writing, to refer to his tone. What else? To the styles used by the writer in writing the text or novel. What else? To the structures and to the storyline. These are all structural elements that we can use to be able to interpret the text using formalism. So you get to see here that formalism is summarized as text equals effects to the readers and meaning production. You can only reach this particular interpretation when you just have to look into the text as a standalone entity. Do not bring in outside context. So we have here a suggested reading for formalism. This is actually an online source, and the content of this online this website are actually from Purdue University, so you can take a look into these sites. Okay, so next is deconstruction. So deconstruction is the ultimate contrast or opposite of formalism. If formalism would treat text as a standalone, deconstruction is the opposite. It amplifies the unsaid and exposes the silences in the text. What is this? Like, you look into a poem, but the poem might talk about, just a simple travel to a particular place. But when you interpret it, you might bring in the idea of isolation, you might bring the idea of abuse. And how are you able to discuss the idea of abuse or isolation? Well, in fact, the poem just discusses about travel. Well, of course, with the use of deconstruction, we break, like using this example, we break the text. We take the parts apart, and we just have to expose the unsaid and the silences. How do we do this? Well, anyway, deconstruction denies that the texts have fixed meanings. Meaning to say, we can interpret the text in various layers. We can interpret the text on various levels of meaning and other sorts. And it stands or it sprouts from the view that language, it produces various images in different people. Like, language is fluid, language is unstable, and it produces a lot of interpretation depending on a particular reader, depending on the background of the reader and other things. Okay, so therefore, language is not stable, and so meaning is fluid. It's continuous. It depends on how you use the particular text to amplify the unsaid, or to depend. It depends on how you look into the text. So ultimately, the text cannot mean merely what its words, signs, and meanings. The constructionists believe that you can take text apart, you can break it. Yeah, you can whip it, well, metaphorically speaking, to examine their contradictions and mutually irreconcilable positions, to just simply break the text apart. How do you do that? Oh, okay, read. All right. Structuralism is like a little bit synonymous to formalism, but it looks into this particular word, meaning and truth. Structuralism is a study of literature for its meaning through the pattern of language. You have to look into the patterns of language, how a particular text is written. Okay, so basically, in finding the narratives or interpreting the narratives of myths and other claims that, some patterns have, some literary texts have patterns. For example, soap opera. When we say Filipino soap opera or telenovelas, we have to have, a handsome man and a very powerless lady who's beautiful, and the lady must be poor, and the handsome man must be like a knight-like, no, mayaman, rich, somehow good looking, somehow, worthy to be called a hunk, worthy to be fought for. And what else? We always have these narratives like rich versus poor, bad versus evil. All of these narratives are contents, of the structures or patterns that we can look into particular narratives or text. Okay, so these are the patterns that we can find in telenovelas. What else? Well, in every story, there is actually contradiction between good and evil. In Darna, we can also see a structure there, like evil versus good, and how somehow in the recent portrayals of Darna, evil comes from our own. Like, we had variations of black Darna, green Darna during Marian Rivera's Darna, that a particular villain may come out from the hero's self or psyche. So these are all varieties of, how we treat the text and how we identify patterns in interpreting text. Okay, so you can also read this one, how structuralism can be used to interpret myth narratives. It's kind of political if we would have to use structuralism to expose the myth-making approach being used the Marcos government to, of course, um, build up the idea of, you know, being his father as a good president or somehow. But of course, historically speaking, there are human rights abuses, thousands of human rights abuses that have that have been done against Filipinos during his reign, and we have had acquired lots of debt from the World Bank during his reign, or I'm sorry for using the word reign, during his administration or government. So these are all realities. Okay, next, um, like this one, structuralists don't believe in knowing about the author or the socio-political context of the text. As for them, the text in itself is enough. So this is partly my leaning, structuralism and formalism and deconstruction somehow, but it depends on the treatment, or it depends on the quality of the text. When the text seems to be, intact, well, I use structuralism or formalism to identify its meaning. Okay, next, we have the study of semiotics. This is the study about sign, signifier, and signified. So to sum it up, if you can see a cross, you might think about death, you might think about Catholicism and all the like stuff. If you can see a sword, you might think about suicide. It's just kidding. You might think about, bravery. You might think about war or anything. If you can see a red rose, you might can see sex as a symbol and an act. You might see romance or eroticism. And if you see a dove, you might see, or you might connote it or relate it to peace, but it can also be seen as prostitution, and it can also be seen as figure, symbol of love. So basically, semiotics is about the use of symbolisms. What are the symbols? Symbols can be tangible or intangible. Yeah, they can be both. They can be tangible, like something that we can hold, something that is concrete. They can also be intangible, something that is like a concept. So this is how semiotic is used to to represent our innermost thoughts and to represent or expose the themes in the literary text. And we can take a look into Marxism. This is my favorite, and well, I'm a Marxist myself, so I have written like personal essays with Marxist leanings. What is Marxism anyway? Marxism is actually a social structure or a theory that looks into our social structure from the economic point of view. Okay, looking into our social structures from an economic point of view. Mayaman, mahirap, may kaya kung saan man dyan. And we look into the people as into group. We group the people according to their resources, according to their function in the economic structures. So we need to study for us to be working class proletariats, mga mahihirap, poor. And when you could climb the social ladder, you can be a lower middle class. If you are a little bit of middle class, you are earning a few bucks, and you can actually afford, a decent quality of living. You can afford with a better rights and obligations. Upper middle class. These are the, high level jobs or professors or somehow officials. Actually, you're not really rich, but you are still more afforded with privileges and better quality of life. And of course, we have lastly the capitalist, the bourgeois. The bourgeois is actually a French term, but definitely bourgeois it refers to the capitalist. Definitely, that's how it goes. Mayaman versus mahirap. All right. So you get to see here that wherever you are in the social class, your privileges, the treatment of people towards you, and even like respect of other people towards you is dependent on your class. So when you are poor, of course, in the Philippines, in these structures or societies, we have lesser rights. We can't even like buy justice, and that's how it goes. And you are more prone to abuse, human rights abuses when you are poor. And of course, poverty really make our life harder in the Philippines. So I hope that everybody will in a way look into things from the Marxist perspective. If we are not going to study hard and we are not going to read and become knowledgeable, we won't be able to get out of these social structures that is corrupt and is really suppressive to the people. Next, we can also look into some themes of text or narratives from the feminist perspective, and this is the objectification of women in the text. So usually, the best reference here is when you see a marketing strategy or marketing advertisement of cars and wines, there must always be women And we of course have to show project women in these skimpy outfits like bikinis or something, and then there's a car. This is what we call objectification of women, the use of women to satisfy the cravings of the patriarchal society. Next, um, in the analysis of the text that identifies gender relations and the struggle, objectifications of women in a patriarchal society, women want equal power relations, meaning to say they want to strive to be afforded with equal rights to men, recognition of their rights and representation also in various contexts, in the workplace, in politics, and even in acquisition of privileges, for example, and even on probably getting better benefits in the workplace, like they can have more paid leaves during their menstruation or menstrual period, and even if they have like dysmenorrhea and they wanted to be out from work, they could actually be afforded with paid leave instead of just being absent. Or yeah, requests for spaces. For example, if a woman is pregnant, he could have like a better space in the workplace. Or if a woman is a nursing mother and she is a working mom, she can request for a space in the office to have his child get nursed in the office. So these are all um, 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 demands, not really demands, but requests of female to have better representation in all sectors. Okay, so a lot more can be discussed, like gender studies, and I will have to explain all of these, but this is not our focus yet. I may not be giving you texts that pertains that or that relates to the use of all of these contemporary theories, but my goal is to at least suggest a text. But instead of giving the text itself, I could just discuss few of these literary theories first before I ask you to interpret a particular text. Okay, so if you have any questions, please reach out to me, send me an email, or DM me, shoot me a DM. So this is it. Okay, have a great day.